Salutations, ladies and gentlemen, the Knife Raven here, back again with another video, and in today's video, I'll be taking a look at a knife from Maserin. Now, Maserin is an Italian manufacturer that was founded in 1960. They've been around for a decent while, have a bit of a following. I wouldn't say they are as popular as lion steel and the like, but they definitely are well regarded. This is the only other Maserin knife I have, and this is the Consoli. I spoke fairly highly of this knife as it's a very beautiful, very unique example of a traditional lockback that's relatively small but yet very ergonomic, and it's just overall a very nice carry knife. My main gripe with this, however, was this crack in the handle. And Maserin, I reached out to them and mentioned this, and they were kind enough to send me some replacement handles. Unfortunately, the coloration on the replacements was a lot brighter and, frankly, in my opinion, less attractive. So that's why I still have the cracked models on, but I will, by all means, keep the replacements because, well, in case this does crack any further, I do have some spares. But aside from that, this is a very nice knife and one that I was quite happy to recommend. Today, I'll be taking a look at another knife from Maserin. This is their classic line, and I believe from what I got from the website, this is a reproduction or a similar style of a knife that they originally produced around the founding of their brand, and so this is something that's been made for quite some time and is being made once again. This is the model number 190R, and this is the, and I'm absolutely going to butcher this pronunciation, the Filiscjna? I'm uncertain as to how to pronounce this, and I could find no real material on this knife or any examples of how it is supposed to be pronounced. So if there are any Italian viewers of mine that would like to correct me, then please, by all means, do so. But here is the Filiscjna, and it's a very nice example of a classic penknife. However, it's quite different than the typical penknife, as it has a Wharncliffe blade. Now, this is the main feature that really drew me to this piece, as I love Wharncliffes. Anyone who has watched my channel for any extended period of time will know that I love Wharncliffes. And so seeing a Wharncliffe penknife from Italy, of all places, is quite unusual. You might see something like that from Sheffield or Case Cutlery with their swayback gent, which I'd almost argue is not necessarily a true penknife. But even so, this is a very interesting, very unique example, and one that really filled a role in my collection that no other knife did. And aside from the blade, I was very much drawn to the handle here. What you're looking at, if the camera would be so kind as to focus, there we are, that is Briar wood Burl, and it's a very nice wood with an excellent grain pattern. It's beautiful. You can see it's got a very glossy look to it. And, of course, the other side is very nice as well. I'd almost argue this is the prettier side, but they're both equally attention-drawing. But we have a pretty simple construction here. Nickel silver polished bolsters with this central, I don't want to call it a bolster, but a central piece of nickel silver, which reminds me of the Clayton Spear Point by Michael May, which has, for those interested, just been released at Heine Haynes. So if you're curious, go have a look at Heine Haynes and you'll see what I mean. But very interesting. This is, of course, a fingerprint magnet, as everything is quite polished. No visible pins. as you can probably tell. We have a steel back spring with nickel silver liners. I do believe these are integral. As you can see, the liner and bolster seems to be a singular piece, as you can probably see there, which would make sense as the addition of an extra bolster. I'm not sure how difficult that would be, so it makes sense to have integral liners here. The back spring continues on to form a little lanyard hole, little loop here. There's no gapping on this knife, which is very, very nice. And everything is smooth and properly sanded. Now, the only real flaw I can name with this knife is the centering. Quite off to the left, and thankfully it may look it, but this is not rubbing, so no issues there, but it is a little bit unfortunate, especially considering the price. This was not a cheap knife from what I recall. But you can see, veers off quite a bit. There is a nail nick and no half stop on this piece. Very nice snap. For such a small knife, I'd probably still give it a 5 on my personal pull scale, which is quite good. For those who don't like a busy blade, this knife might not be for you, as we have the Maserin logo, followed by Italy, and below, stainless steel 440. And for those curious what kind of 440, as I could see that being a fairly prominent and important question, the website states that this is 440C. Now, that is quite a bit different from 440A, or the steel that Rough Rider uses, but 440C, again, bear in mind, was once considered a super steel. So this blade, for such a small little knife, will be very utilitarian and should last you a good while. Also note the noticeable hollow grind and the top of the blade has the etch of Filiscjna. There's no blade play on this knife in any direction. It's very solid. And I have not snapped this knife shut, as the way the spring kind of comes up here, I don't know if there'd be any chance of getting blade wrap, so I'm not going to risk it, but so far it has not accumulated any blade wrap by just walking it shut, which seems like it would be foolproof, but in some rare instances, just simply doing this and letting the blade rest on the spring can cause issues long term. Again, the Wharncliffe profile here is very long, fairly narrow behind the edge, but the actual blade stock is quite a bit thicker than you may expect. The tip is very reinforced and refined, and my cat is currently serenading us in the background. The blade features a satin finish, fairly well done. And the factory edge was very, very sharp. Perhaps not a straight razor, but definitely using sharp right out of the box. Alice, come here, I'm just filming a video. In terms of size, which is something many may be curious of, as this does look like a very small knife, well, let me tell you, it is a small knife. The closed length with the little lanyard loop is sitting at exactly 2.5 inches, and without, just a little over 2 1/4. The blade length is under 2 inches with a cutting edge of 1 3/4. The overall length with the lanyard loop is 4.5 inches, and the overall length without is just a little over 4.25. So by all means, this is a small knife. Definitely keychain sized, although I wouldn't dare put this on a keychain as it would definitely get scratched, and I would not like that to happen. Here are a couple comparisons with similar sized or styled knives. I unfortunately don't have the Victorinox Classic on hand, but here is the Case Swayback Gent, which many may recognize as a typical small knife. You can see that it dwarfs the Maserin by quite a significant degree. And here it is next to another knife I had on me today, which may be a good sign to some. An Ettrick from Arthur Wright in buffalo horn. And the Ettrick is naturally a very long knife, but in terms of the blade, they're actually not that far off. I'll just get this one out of the way so you can see. Of course, this Ettrick has been reprofiled, but they are certainly comparable. Although the Maserin does have a shorter blade overall, or rather a thinner blade, I should say. But in terms of length, they're very comparable. So, the Maserin number 190R Filiscjna. What are my thoughts on this knife? Well, in terms of a stylistic gentleman's knife, or I'd say that this would definitely be the ideal lady's knife, at least what I would see as being. It's a very small, very dainty knife that still has a thick spine, a hollow ground edge featuring a relatively good steel, even compared to all the modern ones we have nowadays. So this would be a very utilitarian knife, but one that should be legal almost anywhere, and is still well made enough that it should withstand a decent bit of utility, and with that steel you should be able to sharpen it up, keep a good edge on it, and all the while it's a very, very pretty knife. I personally wouldn't go out of my way to have the central piece of nickel silver, but it does add a nice little touch to an otherwise very pretty knife, and perhaps enhances it a little. The Briar wood is very unique. This is my first knife with Briar wood Burl, so I'm happy to have that in the collection, and I think that the timber itself is quite beautiful. From what I recall, you can also get this in walnut, so if you prefer a darker toned wood, you can get that as well. But overall, it's a very nice, pretty little penknife, and the style is undeniably unique. This isn't like the kind of typical pen knives you'll see in an antique store from Sheffield or Zollingen. It has a unique style, and something that really, again, can't be compared directly with any other knife that I have. Maserin, to me, I've only had 2 knives from them, and I have found that both are to some degree flawed. And while I would argue the crack in the handle on the console is a bit more of a significant issue, they aren't flawed to the degree where I fault them greatly. Obviously, if you're looking for a perfect knife, neither of these would make the cut, pun intended. But in terms of being a very attractive, very unique, very Italian, and I mean that in the very best way, Italian knives have a certain degree of class to them that's very unique, can't really be compared with anything, and maybe some of the regional knives, which could be akin to Spanish or French pieces of cutlery. They have their own style, and it's one that I very much enjoy. And Maserin, I think, has done a very good job of showcasing that. Obviously, they blend the modern methods of using screws and integral liners with these exotic hardwoods and relatively nice steels. So, overall, I think that they are a very good choice if you're looking for a more unique, elegant carry option. And some of their models, I forget the exact name, I think it's the Maserin Scout, which is a sort of sodbuster, is around $50. So While some of them, the Consoli being a good example, are quite expensive, you can find Maserin knives within the more budget-friendly range. This one I recall being a bit more pricey, and I remind myself that penknives of old, a quality penknife, would not be cheap, but this definitely was a more expensive knife, probably than it should have been. But I, for one, am happy with it. I think that the walk and talk is excellent, the blade steel's excellent, the finish is excellent, I love the handle, I love the style, and for getting a good 3-finger grip and just having a knife that you can slip into your fifth pocket and carry virtually anywhere, I very much enjoy it, and it fills a bit of a niche in my collection. So, there you are, the Maserin 190R Filiscjna, still uncertain about that pronunciation. Very nice little knife, one that I'd recommend if you're looking for a quality penknife, and one that I very much enjoy. So thank you very much for watching. This has been the Knife Raven, as always, signing off. Goodbye.